What to do when your customer says, I need to think about it. Yep, those dreaded words that we've all heard before. Maybe you've heard it too many times before and you're still hearing it today, and that's why you're checking out this video. Also, what I'm going to discuss in this video is highly practical, so you can start using it straight away, and the next time somebody says, I need to think about it, you can literally implement one of the few different ways that I'm about to tell you in this video and maybe get a better result. Before we get into that though, I want you to know this video is really two parts. The second part I'll do another video on at a later date, but I want you to know that that second part is to do with the fact that when somebody says, I need to think about it, it's usually because it's something earlier in the consultation or your meeting with them that you didn't do, or you did do, but predominantly maybe you didn't handle their objections early enough. You didn't pre-handle their objections. In other words, deal with their objections before they even became an objection. Or perhaps you didn't qualify well enough, or you didn't ask the right questions. But again, I'll save that in detail. Just bank it there for another video. For today's video, let's assume that you've done everything right. You've done a brilliant consultation. You've dug to the root of the reason why that client is with you in the first place, and you now feel that you're in the perfect position to ask for the sale. And the client still says, I need to think about it. So with that scenario set up, let's dive into number one, what's happening psychologically in your mind, and then also the psychology of your client, and then also some simple and again, practical steps that you can do the next time that somebody says, I need to think about it. Oh, by the way, before we go any further, I want you to bear in mind that the most important thing, no matter what technique you cover, is your intention. If you're coming across needy or desperate, or that you've got to make money and they have to buy, then of course that's not going to work. But on the flip side of that, if you're simply saying, oh yeah, sure, just let me know when you're ready, then you're potentially allowing somebody to walk away from you that you could really help with your product or your solution. So the intention that you have is fundamental. If you've got the intention to help someone and you know that that client is actually somebody that you can help on a deep level, then most definitely when they say, I need to think about it, we want to gently challenge that decision of I need to think about it. Because at the end of the day, the chances are you're not in business to allow the perfect client to walk away from you time and time again. I realized this in my own career in the early days when people kept saying, I need to think about it. It was so frustrating for me, and not because I wasn't making sales, but because I knew that I could help people, and for whatever reason in that moment I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the structure or approach when people said, hey, I need to think about it and I'll get back to you. And it was only after hundreds of consultations that I got to a point where I'm like, I've got to change. I can't keep having the perfect client that I know I can help walk away from me. And that's when a lot of things, and some of them I'm going to share with you right now, I started to use, and as a result started to see a difference in my clients and how I was able to influence them. So let's talk about this psychology with your client of I need to think about it. I need to think about it is not definitive. It doesn't mean that it is an absolute no. What it does mean is that there are some reservations in your client saying yes. And I want you to know this, that is 100% okay. It is completely normal for your client to want to consider this on a deeper level. Now, it could be that they haven't quite seen the value in it or how your solution relates to them. Maybe, and this is a big one, they want to go ahead, but you've got to remember it is a little bit scary to take that leap of faith into investing in whatever solution you have, and maybe there's a whole commitment that you need your client to go ahead with as well. So the default response from your client is to be like, I'd love to do this, but I just need to think about it. So it's important to know that there's a lot of things going on in the mind of your client when they say those words. What you need to do though, other than to have the pure intention to help them, is to keep your composure, stay calm, and remain confident. Because at the end of the day, you are there to make a difference in their life, true or false. You're there to maybe transform their life on a completely different scale. And you know already that if they walk away from you, that is another person that you could have helped, and in that moment, you didn't have the right influence, you didn't have that ability or that one thing that you said to move them to a yes. I want you to be able to empower your clients to go from a maybe to a yes, or I need to think about it, to a resounding, okay, let's do this. So let's get into the practical elements of this. First of all, here's a few things that you don't want to do. Number one is just simply when somebody says, I need to think about it, to say, okay, yeah, sure, just let me know what you want to do. Because you know when you take that stance, actually what you're doing, you don't mean to, is you're saying, I don't really believe in what I do and I know that I could help you, but if you need time, that's okay. Hey, I'm saying this with kindness. In that moment, it's not actually about you, it's about helping them. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a small percentage of people who have supreme confidence, who are very niched in their area, they're seen with an extremely high level of expertise, and when somebody says, I need to think about it, they have that confidence to say, yeah, sure, let me know what you want to do, because they know ultimately that person will come back to them. But also, I see that as a little bit of a cop-out, even when I've heard some of the top people in what they do, when they say, Pete, that's how I handle objections. In fact, what you can do more practically when somebody says, I need to think about it, is you can respect that fact that, yes, they do need to think about it. So you can say, I completely understand where you're coming from. It's a big decision. I would want to make sure that I'm making the right decision as well. Do you mind if I ask outright, what do you feel there is that you need to think about it? This is a straight up approach. I personally don't actually like this too much, but I'm going to share it with you now because it's actually the easiest one to do. But what it can do is it can highlight the reason why your client is saying they need to think about it. They may say that it's the price, the investment. They might say it's not a good time right now, and then you can actually dive into that whole reason of why it could be a good time for them, or you can appreciate that it is an investment. However, they also mentioned that they had a goal that they wanted to achieve, and they know that in order to achieve that goal, it's going to be some investment to move forward. Now that brings me on to my second point, and this I really love, and I've used this for years in my life. So now we go back to this whole thing. Your client says, I need to think about it. What you can do now is say, I appreciate that you need to think about it. Do you mind if I just go back to the original reason why we're having this discussion in the first place? And then you pause. Let them tell you the original reason for seeing you in the first place. My assumption is that they still want to achieve X, Y, and Z. So surely something has changed from the moment they met you to when they're at that point of actually saying yes. So simply by going back to that original reason of why that client is there in the first place, you can explore it on a deeper level. I've found this so many times because when somebody said to me, hey, I need to think about it, I actually get a little bit confused because I'm sitting there, I'm going through the whole process with them, and then we're ready to move forward. And I thought I dealt with all the objections early on. Then I think, hold on, what was your original reason for coming to see me or having this discussion in the first place? And the client then has to kind of do the work that, well, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. Now, a great thing about doing this is that you have to remember that your client still wants their goal. However, when they've gone through your product presentation and all the ways that you're going to help them and how much it's going to cost them to do it, now they might not be thinking about their goal. Instead, they're thinking about, oh my goodness, there's all this commitment that I have to have in order to reach this goal. The great thing about going back to the original reason why they came to see you is it takes the focus away from this into the goal that they have. People don't buy your product. They actually buy the goal. That's why I always ask people, what is it that you sell? And if somebody says, I sell personal training, I say, you don't sell personal training. You sell body transformation. You sell somebody going from point A, where they're not feeling good about their body, to point B, where they're feeling the best they've felt in their entire life. So it's very important that you don't get product focused when somebody says, I need to think about it, and you move over to their goal. Now, the final thing I'm going to share in this video, and there's so many more things, by the way, and drop a comment below if you want me to share other ways that you can overcome that dreaded, I need to think about it. But I will say as a disclaimer, you need to be exceptionally confident when you use this approach that I'm about to share with you. When your client says, I need to think about it, again, you can say, I appreciate that you need to think about it. Do you mind if I ask you a different question? Now, the great thing about asking permission to ask a different question is that you're keeping in rapport with your client, but also you're getting to refocus them again. So you say, do you mind if I ask you a different question? Client says yes. Now, I'm assuming that you still want to achieve your goal, and I appreciate, even though you need to think about it, you still want to achieve X or Y goal. The client again says yes. In that case then, this would be plan A. What I've put together for you, do you agree that this would be plan A for you? This will take you from A to be, and you'll achieve the goal that you want. The client says yes. Now they're confirming what you've been through with them is an absolute game changer for them. So now we go back to speaking to the client. So if you're not going to go ahead with plan A, do you mind if I ask, what is your plan to achieve your goal? Now, the great thing about this, and you do need to be confident, is that it totally exposes that number one, your client still has the goal, but number two, that they don't really have a plan for themselves. Now, if you do this in the right way, with the right intention, the right tone of voice, and I've done this countless times, the client then kind of trips over themselves and says, well, you know, I'll just do this or I'll do that. And before you know it, they go, oh, I don't really even have a plan. And that's when you say, look, I get it. This is a commitment. However, what are you more confident about? Are you more confident about this plan over here where you don't go ahead? Or are you more confident about going ahead with what we've put in place for you? And then you let the client do the work. Now, this is my bonus tip for you when a client is about to say, I need to think about it. It's one of those moments where you can recognize, oh my goodness, they're about to think about it. And again, this is something I've done many times. I've trained many people to do this as well. And it can actually make a big difference in your closing ratio. The moment that you identify the client's about to say, I need to think about it, instead of them saying it, you bring it up first. You say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, I appreciate that you probably need a few minutes to think about this. I'm just gonna go and get a tea or coffee. Would you like something? And then when I get back, just simply let me know what you want to do, whether it's a yes or no. I'm completely okay either way. By doing this, it works so well because you get to step out the room, the client wants to say yes, people want to buy, and it actually gives them the space and the freedom to sit there and be like, yeah, actually I want to do this. And by the time you get back with that coffee and you sit down with them, give them their coffee and say, so what do you want to do? That's when your client can say yes. For the years of doing this, especially when I knew my consultations were on point, and this is key, by the way, the amount of times I would step away, step back into the room a few minutes later, and 95 to 98% of the time the client would say yes. I want your client to say yes as well. Remember, you don't need to pressure them, you don't need to come across salesy, and you certainly don't need to come across needy or desperate. It's all about your intention, and if your intention is pure and you're there to help them, you can use any of the ways and methods that I've shared with you, and I'm going to do other videos on this as well, but there's so much you can still do when your client says, I need to think about it. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow.